guys, how's it going? Splendid. Okay, so because right now in the UK we are currently celebrating the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, her 70th year on the throne, I thought it would be rather funny, I guess, to do a cover of God Save the Queen by the Sex Pistols. Maybe slightly controversial and probably in poor taste, but whatever. It's a great song, and yeah, I thought it would be fun to do a cover of it on the bass. So, yeah. Obviously, this song came out back in 1977, back during the Queen's Silver Jubilee, and I guess, in a way, it was kind of a protest against like the monarchy and all the excesses involved around the celebrations of the Silver Jubilee at the time. Obviously, within the UK and around the world, there was a lot of economic problems back in the 70s, and I think a lot of working class people were struggling at the time, so I guess the Sex Pistols in particular felt like having a massive celebration, surrounding, the royal family and all that kind of thing was kind of inappropriate at the time, I guess. I mean, the Sex Pistols later claimed that it wasn't a song about the Jubilee, it just happened to fall around that time. But yeah, it's a cool song. Like I just said, within the UK in particular, in the 1970s, there was a lot of economic problems. Inflation and unemployment had risen sharply. There was a lot of power cuts going on, and the government were actually forced to ration electricity at the time, which is, super crazy nowadays when you think about, our power consumption. There was even an enforced 3-day working week as well. So yeah, I think a lot of people were feeling the pinch. And I think, with the Sex Pistols and probably a lot of their fans at the time, they kind of felt like having a massive celebration for the royal family was like super inappropriate. And like an unnecessary and inappropriate show of wealth and self-importance, I guess. Yeah, especially with a lot of people, struggling to even put food on the table. It just kind of felt out of touch with a lot of people at the time, I guess. Whether or not it was actually the Jubilee itself that inspired the Sex Pistols to write God Save the Queen, I believe it was written several months before the Jubilee. Either way, it's probably one of my favourite songs from Nevermind the Bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols, an absolutely fantastic album. I think if you're not overly familiar with classic punk, I guess, this is the perfect place to start because it's pretty much the template for a lot of stuff that came afterwards. Yeah, man, I mean, this is probably an album that I got when I was about 13 or something, and yeah, I just thought it was fantastic. I think at the time, at least, there was a lot of punk music on both sides of the Atlantic, within the UK and the US, but personally, I think the Sex Pistols are like the archetype and just the prime example of what punk music was and what it evolved into, throughout the 80s and the 90s, and even into the 2000s, So yes, I would recommend anyone who, is getting into punk music or, wants to listen to some classic punk or where it sort of came from originally, Nevermind the Bollocks is the perfect place to start. With regard to the bass playing on Nevermind the Bollocks, I think most people kind of picture Sid Vicious as the bass player for the band, and he definitely was, but he was not the guy that wrote all the actual tracks themselves. That was a man called Glenn Matlock. Unfortunately, Glenn Matlock was fired pretty much after they started recording the album, and then yeah, I think he was credited for all of the songs but 2 on the album itself, but he only recorded one of them in the studio, and then he was promptly sacked by the band. So I think that's got a sting a little bit, because I think, he was a pretty damn good songwriter. I think he wanted to take them in more of a Beatle-esque kind of direction, whereas I think Johnny Rotten and the other guys wanted to go for a more sort of hardcore punk kind of attitude, I guess. It was after Glenn Matlock left the Sex Pistols that the remaining members of the band decided to enlist Sid Vicious on the bass. Now, I think they tried to record with Sid in the studio, but he basically wasn't up to it. He wasn't a very good bass player, and I think they really just wanted him for his personality and his image, because he was, quite charismatic, I guess, and had a good stage presence. But I believe it was actually Steve Jones, the guitar player for the band, that literally recorded all the guitar parts and pretty much all of the bass parts, I think, as well. I think Sid might have been there for a couple of recordings, but it was basically just Steve Jones that recorded the majority of the tracks on the bass and guitars. Now, with regards to the bass parts themselves, I am definitely not claiming, of course, to have played them perfectly, because this is definitely just, disclaimer, my interpretation of how to play the song. Yeah, I just listened to the song a bunch of times and just played along a lot, and that's basically it. I didn't sort of like do any research into it at all. I literally just, you know, played along to the song and found my way through, and you know, this video is what I came up with, so I hope it is good enough. But yes, I think for anybody who is just learning the bass or has been playing for like, you know, several months, the Sex Pistols are definitely a great place to start because it's not overly technical, and yeah, it's just super fun to play, man. Even nowadays, you know, after all these years, I love listening to the Sex Pistols. I think they're fantastic. There are other punk bands, of course, that I like, you know, the Clash, the Ramones, New York Dolls, and then later stuff as well, you know, I suppose Black Flag and the Germs, and then moving on from there to like, you know, I guess Nirvana were kind of punk, do you know what I mean? I know technically they were grunge, but you know, I think they would have called themselves punk rock or new wave or whatever it was Kurt wanted to call them. But yes, the Sex Pistols, pucker. Now, funnily enough, unlike the Sex Pistols, I actually don't mind the Queen. I wouldn't say I'm exactly a royalist, but you know, I like Lizzie, she's alright. I think, you know, having a monarch like, you know, Queen Elizabeth as like, you know, how I regard her as like the representative for our country, as opposed to say politicians and, you know, prime ministers that we've had in the past. I think it's better to have somebody, you know, like the Queen as like, you know, sort of a visual representation of our country, I guess. I think she's done all right with her life. She's done like sort of positive things for people, and you know, she hasn't exercised her power. She has still got quite a lot of powers, but she decides not to exercise them, and she, you know, lets sort of like democracy happen, I suppose, which I super respect. Yeah, I mean, technically she could sort of like declare war if she wanted to, but she, you know, she doesn't. She lets like, you know, the people vote and the politicians deal with all that, I guess. But yeah, anyway, I digress. Yeah, basically, you know, I think it's good to have like the monarchy and that. I don't think it should be abolished or anything like that. I think, you know, it's a tradition, and it's just good to have something like that to sort of like, you know, hold on to our heritage, I guess. I'm kind of digressing and going off on one now, but all I want to say is thank you so much for watching. You guys are awesome. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, then please feel free to hit like and subscribe and all those awesome things that you guys always do. Yeah, this one was fun. Yes, take it easy, guys. Have a good weekend, and hopefully I shall see all of you awesome people in the next one. Peace.